So I was the historian and curator at the College Football Hall of Fame downtown Atlanta, and I still sometimes don't believe it's real that I got paid to talk about college football and that game.
What kind of work does a historian in that environment do?
One of the great things about my experience there, every day looked a little different. I always kind of compared to the Pawn Stars, and you really never knew what would come in from donors, from the athletes and coaches themselves, or just things we'd get a call about and say, hey, come check this out. Maybe I have something interesting. I don't really know. Or my great great grandfather passed this down. We don't want it to cause a fight in the family. Maybe you guys should have it. And so again, every day was different. Some days I'm building exhibits, some days I'm back in the archives, some days I'm doing social media and things with the marketing team. Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it.
All right, welcome to our Leveraging Your Voice podcast. Today we have a special guest, Jeremy Swick from SwickMedia. I'm really excited to have him on today because we were just chatting a little bit, and this guy's doing all kinds of crazy fun things. So I think you're going to really love listening to his story and all these different things he's doing. A little bit with the NFL. I think I'm going to ask him about his rugby past. We're going to talk about museums. We're going to talk about masters. We're going to talk about everything with this guy. So I'm excited. Oh, ESPN and CNN. So there's no end to the list of things that we could talk about. But Jeremy, I got to say, I can't do like a 5-hour podcast episode. So we got to keep it a little shorter than that. So we got to pick the highlights of all the fun things that you've done.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to getting into the conversation.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So here we go. First, start out with just tell us where you live. Are you in the Great North?
I am in Wisconsin right now, the Midwest. I've moved all over the country and I keep finding my way back to Wisconsin. And I think I'm here to stay for a while now.
All right, good. Now, before we talk about what you're doing there in Wisconsin, where were you just before Wisconsin? Was it down south a little bit?
Yeah, before this, I actually lived in Atlanta for a number of years, working there, playing rugby there, and just really enjoying the South and all it had to offer.
How long were you there?
I was there about 4.5 years,
All right.
and it was great.
Where'd you work down there? Because this is part of your story and it's interesting.
So I was the historian and curator at the College Football Hall of Fame downtown Atlanta, and I still sometimes don't believe it's real that I got paid to talk about college football and that game.
What kind of work does a historian in that environment do?
One of the great things about my experience there, every day looked a little different. I always kind of compared to the Pawn Stars, and you really never knew what would come in from donors, from the athletes and coaches themselves, or just things we'd get a call about and say, hey, come check this out. Maybe I have something interesting. I don't really know. Or my great great grandfather passed this down. We don't want it to cause a fight in the family. Maybe you guys should have it. And so again, every day was different. Some days I'm building exhibits, some days I'm back in the archives, some days I'm doing social media and things with the marketing team.
That's awesome. Now, what kind of degree do you have that would make you a person that would have such a job?
So one of those things I always tell people, I think I earned my degree in ignorance. And luckily, it turned out to be a master's in public history. I just kept doing things I enjoyed. And through those experiences, I was really able to create a bit of a career for myself.
Did you go to school up in Wisconsin, where you're from?
Yes. So I earned my undergrad and my master's at the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I loved it there. I was there a little bit too long. I was there about 7 years solid. So I enjoyed my time, but I was also ready to move on.
Yeah, that's great. So over at the Museum of College Football, you said?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you make decisions about what was important that would go in the museum, what was not important that wouldn't go in the museum? Were you a part of a team that did that? How did that work?
So, like any good sports team, I definitely was part of a team. One of the things I did was kind of handle the guest or potential donor and talk them through what they might have. Sometimes I really wanted to get their mission to sell it. We probably wouldn't be the right person or right organization for them. Do they want to donate? And of course, without blindly saying yes, sometimes it was, all right, let's see what you have. Maybe it was just some old newspaper clippings. At those times, maybe I am just saying these are great things. How about I scan them so we have the copies, but maybe you want to keep those newspaper articles in your family because they don't, for us, didn't mean as much.
Hmm.
There was other times where they wanted, and a lot of times I tell people they were testing us. They gave us something that was pretty cool and really wanted to see what we did with it. So one of the things I always try to do is using our little mobile kiosks is doing almost like an item of the week or artifact of the week. And just so we can send pictures to those donors and show that maybe it's not on permanent display, but it's something we value, honor, and cherish.
Mm. How'd you decide what would go on permanent display?
A lot of times it was thematic. So it we were working on a new exhibit. So maybe it was celebrating historically black colleges and universities. Then maybe my radar, if you will, would gear more towards schools like that and players like that to have those on a more permanent basis.
Mm.
Sometimes it was just more of what schools were willing to offer. One of the biggest things is we, on an annual basis, took in awards and jerseys and memorabilia from the Heisman Trophy winner, the national champions. And so a lot of times those were already decided, I guess, for us.
Okay. So Michigan, since they won the national championship last year, should have something in the museum now.
They should. I sure hope so. I hope I left enough of a blueprint for them to do that. It was always fun because we'd give the schools a call, and obviously you don't want to jinx it. You don't want to start calling them about national championship
Yeah.
stuff before the games, but you better bet the day after, the 2 days after, a lot of those things. For example, I always give a shout out to Alabama. They were great about sending stuff, and once we'd kind of got in a rhythm, and they happened to be in the college football playoff quite a bit, their stuff would be I'd get a call from them saying what was on board and ready for us to show.
Well, unlike most, they had a lot of practice at it.
Absolutely.
So now you're out of Georgia, you moved up to Wisconsin, and I'm thinking you probably are still in the museum business. So what part of your life is connected with that right now up in Wisconsin?
So currently I am the archivist at the Wisconsin Black Historical Society in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it just celebrates the rich history of African Americans, not just in Milwaukee or downtown, but in the whole state. And it's just such a fascinating history for me to learn, but also help them build the archives for the next generation.
I love that word archivist. What's the definition of an archivist?
So I don't know if I have the school definition. It's been a while, but I always joke I'm the keeper of things. I make sure everything has a home, everything has a place, and has a reason behind why we have it. And I always try to make myself a resource for researchers, students of all ages, and people who just want to learn more about history.
Are you also a part of a team there that decide what come in and what doesn't come in and what you do want and don't want, that sort of thing?
Yes, it's one of those things. It's been an interesting experience because a lot of times we get more drop-off donations than I've had at other museums.
Mm.
So it's a family member who just uses us, or I shouldn't say use us, they use us as a community resource. So sometimes it's a call from our director letting them know that they're bringing some stuff through and they want us to have it. From there, again, my job becomes, okay, what are we going to hang on to? Do we need 17 copies of something? Maybe it's keeping 3 or 4. And so from there, again, luckily here it's a little bit of a space issue. So when I'm talking with my team, it's sometimes explaining that, okay, we can only keep 4 because we have more of a finite amount of room.
Well, that's all interesting. Now, in addition to all the fun stuff you're doing with museums and have been doing, talk to us a little bit about the work that you do in social media. I believe you have a business called SwickMedia. Is that right?
Yes, it is. And it's one of those things where I was telling you before the show, I just kept finding ways to blend passions and interests into, I guess, careers, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So, what I heard you just say there maybe is while you were at the museums, you started to get into the Swick media type of thing.
Correct. So paint a quick picture. It was about 2018. I was working at a small museum up in Carver County, Minnesota. I had moved up there. I vaguely knew where the place was, but I knew I needed a job. I wanted to stay in my field. I had been working second shift cleaning bathrooms with a master's degree. It was time to move on, and that was the first opportunity. I also knew it was a 15-month position. And that's one thing they don't tell you about museums, especially when you're first getting started. You're usually grant funded. So it's a 15-month position here,
Hmm.
6 months here, 12 months here, until you're able to hopefully get a full-time opportunity. I moved up there and realized that there was a need for some social media. And of course, these agencies, understandably, were more geared towards those large institutions where the money really wasn't an object. Whereas with smaller museums, we had to make our dollar stretch a little farther. I also knew with my time being limited, any place I went for the foreseeable future, I needed to add more skills to my tool belt. And social media became one of those. And people ask how? It was spending about 60 hours on YouTube and a lot of Google searches.
Awesome. So while you were in the museum business and working your way toward what was a really nice job at the College Football Museum, you were building up your skills in social media.
Yes, and I always tell people it wasn't all altruistic. I was also very broke. Museums, unfortunately, don't always pay the best, and so I did need to find a way to also supplement my income into creating, and it became creating content. I had thought about getting maybe a second job, but I wanted to find another avenue to have that income where I felt comfortable staying in the museum field.
All right, which you've done. That,
Yes.
yeah, that's great. So that's a success story. And today with Swick Media, what sort of things do you do?
So I always tell people we work with a wide range of clients, everyone from solo entrepreneurs to businesses. And fortunately, we do some work with the NFL alumni on a few different podcasts, which leads into what I work on primarily is podcast production, creating content from the podcast, whether it's us designing and helping people create an outline to have the podcast of their dream, or to do clips and editing as people needed.
So Swick Media works in social media, and one of the key areas that you do work in is with podcasts. Either one, setting people up to do their podcast and then supporting them in that, or if someone has a podcast, they can send you episodes and you'll find clips and do all that kind of fun stuff for them.
Correct, correct. And as I mentioned, it's just, again, I had grown up loving football, loving sports, and being from Wisconsin, of course, the Green Bay Packers were always on the top of my list. And I also loved playing rugby growing up from high school to college to a men's team I'm still part of. It was another thing because I was fortunate to leverage Swick Media to actually work with USA Club Rugby as their social media director.
Awesome. Now, I think that another member of BDC, Black Diamond Club, is into rugby. Is that correct? You guys are sort of connected through rugby?
Correct. So Tamika Taylor, me and her went to college together. We were only there about a year or so together, but we've known each other for, over a decade now. Her husband, James Taylor, was also a rugby aficionado. And while we didn't play together, we've definitely played in alumni tournaments and seen each other quite a bit over the years.
Awesome. That's awesome. All right. So, with the podcast, I want to ask one more question, then I have some other fun questions for you. You also do your own podcast, is that right? What's that called and what do you do with that?
Correct. I do my own podcast. It's called Into the Unknown with Jeremy Swick. And I'll say, as a historian by trade, I firmly believe everyone has their own story. Everyone has an origin story. And I think the world would be a better connected place if people just sat down and listened to each other's stories. I was fortunate through my past experiences to interview everyone from NFL players to my seventh grade social studies teacher, who was one of the first ones to really instill that love for history in me.
Very interesting. I love how you're focused on people's origin stories. Here today, we're getting a little bit of your origin story.
Absolutely.
People can get to know
I think
you.
it really defines people, and it again just creates that springboard. And I think the more you learn about someone, you can kind of start to see where they come from. Maybe your views are different, maybe your opinions are different, but I think the more we know about each other, the better off we are, whether it's in the school or in work or if you're on a sports team, knowing how another player plays. I think it just helps create those building blocks.
I love that. Now let's talk about some fun things. You mentioned that you work with some NFL players. Talk us through that a little bit. What NFL players have you, the SwickMedia, I think you said, do you work with?
So first I want to tell the story about how it happened.
All right. I'm all
I
excited about that.
Yes, so I was fortunate working at the College Football Hall of Fame. I had met quite a few different athletes, and one of the things is when I meet anyone, I always like to add them on LinkedIn or social media just to create that connection. Maybe there's nothing we can do for each other or work together at that exact moment, but maybe down the road. Fast forward, I'm listening to one of my favorite NFL players, Amon Green. He's now an esports coach and professor at the University of Nebraska. He has his own podcast called the Amon Green's Gamers Lounge, where he talks about all things video games, from retro games to current events going on in that space. Well, for me, it was a cold reach out on LinkedIn to him. I had seen an area where I loved watching the podcast, but I felt like not enough people really knew about it. I had started doing social media clips, and I reached out to him cold on LinkedIn and was like, "Hey, Mr. Green, gotta come, come politely and correct." And I was like, "Hey, I think I can help you. My company can help you, and here you go. Let me know if I can help." And that was long story short, but that's kind of how it ended up working. We ended up getting on a call, ended up working together, and it was one of those things. I had been fortunate already meeting Dorsey Levens back when I was at the College Football Hall of Fame, and so it was almost more a little bit of a reunion when we reconnected on their podcast because they do one with former Green Bay Packers during the season, including Gilbert Brown.
Awesome. So that's a couple of players. Any other players to mention that you're working with?
So those are the primary players I work with on a regular basis. Whenever I can help out, again, a lot of times it's USA Club Rugby or Club Rugby guys, and just finding ways to support people. We talked a little bit before the show, just finding different ways to provide value for someone. And I always tell people, give without expectation. If it would have been a no or no thank you or no response, I think I would have been just as happy creating that content. So I always tell people, of course, in a business, you need money to be successful. But I think in life, more than anything, you need, I think, friendships, relationships, that relationship capital Sean always talks about, and creating, I think, just a better community, if that makes sense.
It does. And your story is really a story about a lot of those relationships that you built over the years. When you were over meeting them, there was no thinking, hey, I'm going to work with him later in my podcast or have him doing clips for me or anything like that. But the relationships that you build lead to things that you can't see at the time. And a lot of the stories you tell are examples, really good examples of that sort of thing happening.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's so much to just be authentic in your approach, whether it is you want money, come tell people you want money, tell people what you're honestly looking for, because especially with people who have seen success in their lives, they've seen enough people who have, no, excuse me, they've seen enough people who don't have the right intentions. And
Yeah.
so I think it's always doing your best to come authentically as you. I think it just makes you more successful in the long run.
Well, Jeremy, if somebody's watching and they say to themselves, well, I'm interested in Jeremy's story and I want to maybe work with him, where would they go? What's your website? And then what would it look like? How would they connect with you and what would happen and how would all that unfold?
Oh, I appreciate it. So I'm try not to overthink it. It's swickmedia.com.
I love
You
that.
can,
You first told me that name. You said swiftmedia.com. Paul, I didn't overthink it. That's so funny. Go ahead, keep going.
No, absolutely. And so look on there and you can just kind of see some of the services we offer, from logo creation to podcasting to just seeing how we can help build your brand, your name, your business, whatever it may be. Can also shoot me an email, jswick@swickmedia.com, if email's more your preference. But I'm also on social media. You can find me on most places at The Average Historian. And I love sharing history and life and sports, and there's a little bit of everything, kind of like I mentioned with the Pawn Stars. You really never know what I'll be talking about sometimes. If you're watching, you can see all the bobbleheads behind me. It's a little bit of everything, and I just like sharing that story. In mentioning what it looks like to work with me, we'll sit down, we'll have a kind of discovery call and talk about maybe your ideas for a podcast and see if we be the right fit. From there, one of the best services we offer is the done for you podcasting. We find a place for you to either record, depending on your locale, or help you get the right equipment you need to be successful. From there, you record episodes, we do outlines together, and I basically would take it, my company would edit it, and we would create short reels, but also make sure your stuff is posted on all the various podcasting platforms.
That's awesome. That's a great service. I have one question that just to check. Do you also do like website building, or is that not part of what you do?
Not quite what we do, excuse me, not quite what we do, but I do have some people that I've worked with to help create my website, but also other websites that I definitely, it's a partnership. I kind of hand them off to you, but they do an amazing job as well.
Yeah, because the website thing's almost like its own thing. People do that. And what you're talking about seems like a little bit different. So I just wanted to check to make sure.
Correct. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, so that's great. I love that. So we're closing in here on the end. I could talk to you forever, it seems. But do you have anything we missed? Anything you want to share? Anything you want to leave the audience with?
I think the biggest thing is when I'm talking to, whether it's, my peers or colleagues or people at events or students, I just always say and tell people, the advice I guess I would give is just give your best effort, and just, again, we've said it already, but be authentic to who you are. Good, bad, and different. I think people are always trying to do their best. And I think you do better when you show that. You show that, I guess, vulnerability or that opportunity to connect with people. I just think it makes people more approachable. And you don't want to be someone who is talking, they're talking behind your back, and maybe it's a good thing or a bad thing, but they're like, oh, he was really great to talk to. Someone else is saying, oh, I had a terrible experience with them. I think you always just want to shine your authentic light, however that may be, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, being a podcast expert, how do I do in my background? This is my first podcast with my new background.
Your background looks amazing. I like how it's centered. It gives a good ambience of just what the show's all about. I love it.
You're making me feel good. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I
Your
even
mic
put
sounds
little
great as
plants
well.
in too.
I love it. I love it. Your mic sounds great too.
Oh, well, thank you. All right. So, folks, thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm Paul Rakowicz with prvocalcoaching.com. And at PR Vocal Coaching, what I do is I help people speak with confidence in just 8 weeks. So if you are someone who wants to do better using their voice, think about what we call this, leveraging your voice. That's my podcast. So if you want to better leverage your voice, head over to prvocalcoaching.com and take a look at some of what we do there. On the blog, there's lots of free little trainings that you can look at. So just without any cost, you can just go there and learn some things and maybe even be better from that. So that's something you can do. For Mr. Jeremy Swick, you can go to SwickMedia.com. Don't overthink it. You will find his smiling face and all of the goods that he has. So that's easy to do. Jeremy, anything else to say before we say goodbye?
Oh, I just want to I appreciate you for letting me be on your platform, and I am excited to see how this relationship continues to grow.
Awesome. Do you feel like we gave you a chance to leverage your voice?
It's crazy. I think you did exactly what the title of the podcast says, and I
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Jeremy, say bye. Bye to everybody. We will see you again next time. I hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, click like and share it and all that sort of stuff, and reach out to Jeremy. He can help. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.
Fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.